Hey Kingdom Yogis, John Arnold here, and welcome to this video. I'm going to share with you lessons from what I called my first 30 in the first 30 discipline. It was my first goal of 2021. It was a cool rocking success, and I want to share with you 4 valuable lessons, takeaways I have from, if you don't know what that discipline was, taking the first 30 minutes of the first 30 days of the year and spending them in a prayer and devotional time. Now, before I jump into that real quickly, I hope you'll take a moment and press subscribe, like this video if you do like it, and maybe hit that notification bell so you don't miss any other videos. All right, well, let's go ahead and move into what I did. First off, if you aren't aware, for my 30 minutes, there were several core elements. I would light a candle and say, "Speak, Lord, your servant is listening," and then I would sit in 5 minutes of silence. That was to create kind of just an open space to be fully present to God and get my mind to calm down. Even though it was the first 30 minutes of the day, I wanted to go into the day really focused on God. And that was really the whole point of this thing. I wanted to go into the year feeling regrounded in my faith and a deeper sense of connection with the Lord. Definitely happened out of spending this 30 minutes. After I'd light my candle, then I would sing a hymn. I thought that was going to be optional. I said it was going to be optional when I started. I did a hymn every single day and loved it. I just sang a cappella. I just had a hymn book, flip it open, randomly pick something, thumb through and go, "Hey, that looks cool," and I'd sing it. Once I finished singing, I used a book called the Moravian Daily Text. It has devotional Bible readings for each day, an Old Testament reading, Psalm, and a New Testament. At least so far, that's what I'm seeing every day in it. And then it has snippets of Scripture and snippets of hymns and a closing prayer, all organized around a theme for that day. Super enriching. I will get back to that in a moment when I talk about 4 lessons that I learned. So I spent time in the Word, directed by Moravian Daily Text. Then I would journal. And specifically, when I would journal, I would focus on either praising the Lord or unpacking and responding in conversation with God to something that came out of the daily text. So like one day I read a passage from the Psalms, and it talked about pouring out our hearts before the Lord and trusting in Him in all things. And I happened to go through something where I had 2 or 3. Well, it's kind of like God got in my face on a prayer weekend I went on and confronted me with things that I really need to change about me to be more faithful. And that was a scary thing to admit. And so I poured out to God in my journaling that day my fears around that, and voiced how I was going to try to put my trust in Him to carry me through that. So just an example of what that might look like. The point being that when I journal in this journal, it wasn't sort of the self-development stuff that I do in my other journal where I journal wins for the day, gratitude, and all that. No, this was more like having a date with God where, I was lovingly sharing my heart with God and listening and interacting rather than me processing my life and thinking out loud on the paper. Sometimes there was a little overlap with that, but it was not a diary. It was conversation with the Lord. So that's what I did. Now, 4 really quick takeaways if you want to do something like this. If you want to do a long period of prayer time, like 30 minutes, or even I think for shorter ones, and 30 may seem like an eternity to you, you don't need to jump in if it does at that place. I've done different disciplines like this before, so I knew that was something that I could pretty comfortably accomplish. But if you are going to do particularly lengthy devotional times, it's super helpful. Lesson one, number one, it's super helpful for having a pattern and a plan for how you're going to spend that time. It's not, I think sometimes when I talk about using, say, prayer methods or plans like that, people are like, well, can't you just talk to God? Well, absolutely, you can just talk to God. There's no problem with that. I think sometimes it's really helpful to have conversational starters or, topics that you talk to God about that you wouldn't have normally chose on your own, hence using an outside resource. So having a format for how I was going to spend the time made 30 minutes extremely doable. I never felt like I was struggling to stay in God's presence for that 30 minutes, with one exception that I'll come to at my very last point. But really helpful in smoothing the wheels for me, taking time to devotion and spend that large of a time in devotion. So next thing, second thing I've already alluded to, super helpful to have a devotional guide of some kind and beneficial because inevitably the Lord would use things out of this to speak some deep truths to me that I really don't think would have happened if I had just been left to my own devices to kind of randomly pick what I wanted to read every day. I have done that, and definitely God can use that as well. God can use anything to speak to us at any time, but I'm just saying, when you have something that systematically is taking you through Scripture and people have thoughtfully put time into themes, and you expose yourself to that and allow yourself to meditate upon it, it's just a richer experience than being left to your own devices. So I highly encourage using some kind of devotional guide, even if it's just a little, these are not big pages, right? That's one page right there. That's it. Super rich, though. Third thing, and that is, though I can't quite put words to it, I'm realizing that having chosen to make that the first fruits of the day, if you will, that I was going to give God that time first, super valuable experience. It became formative for how the rest of the day would often go. I'm still struggling to know how to voice the benefit of it. It's more a feeling right now of I feel a distinct difference in how I go into and through my day when I take time getting grounded spiritually first, rather than spending that time mainly reflectively at the end of the day, which is more what I'm doing now. Uh, I probably won't do 30 minutes every morning, but I want to have a more concentrated morning devotion in addition to, I won't say rather than, but probably in addition to my evening time. I think part of it too is just the fact that by giving God your first fruits, that's a very concrete way of just making God the priority and making everything else work around it. There were a few times where my wife would say, like, hey, you want to go to the park? I'm going to go walk. And I'd say, I'd love to go with you, but I really need to finish my devotional time first. Do you mind waiting a little while? And, if not, go ahead. I'll catch you afterwards. But usually she'd be like, yeah, that's cool. I can wait. And she'd do something else while I finished up. Something good about that, about having an anchor point with God that other things have to work around, rather than sort of giving God leftover time. So, third piece was first fruits, really valuable practice. So those first three things are very strategic, right? Having a plan, super helpful for long periods, makes it easier to act on. Using an outside resource makes it a much richer experience. First fruits, gives it a more formative impact on your day. The fourth thing is more, it's not so much strategic, tactical, whatever you want to call it. It's it's just an awareness thing to be mindful of if you decide to do devotional practice. I realized after I got into this for a few days, there came kind of the mushy middle where the novelty, joy, newness, whatever you want to call it, of trying something new was over. And now it's really moving into being a discipline, right? Where I realized that I was getting into at times what I call a checklist mentality around my devotional time. And the devotional time had subtly shifted from being time with God and rather instead a task I was making sure I got done. And that's an important distinction that it can be kind of subtle if you're not paying attention. I call it checklist devotional or checklist prayer because we kind of get in the mind space of, oh, I got my Bible reading done. Oh, I got my journaling done. Check it off my list. And that it's almost like the activity becomes the end in itself. I think that when that happens, we're either into or dangerously close to that place where God, like with Israel said, hey, you're bringing sacrifice before me, but your hearts are far from me. You're just doing howl sacrifice. Like you're going through all the motions, but you don't care about me. I didn't put it that crassly, but I think that's what he was saying when he said your hearts are far from me. And I realized that there came a point where I had days that if I was honest with myself, it was about getting my devotional done and sticking to achieving my goal rather than being in God's presence. And at that point, it's worthless time almost. Not entirely, because God will speak to and through that and use it anyways, I find. But it certainly misses the mark and the intention and misses the richness of what it could be. So just be mindful of that. Like, I think what a few red flags to see when you're falling into that are if you find yourself like kind of looking at your watch, oh, have I gotten to my 30 minutes yet? You've kind of checked out. I mean, imagine being on a date with somebody, like taking them out their dinner, and you decide ahead of time, I'm going to spend an hour with this person, and 45 minutes into the conversation, you started doing this. Seriously? Are we going to do that to God? Like, seriously? Checking my watch now, God. So if you start doing that, what's happened is you've kind of moved into the devotional time is become an exercise in and of itself. It's not a means to something, it's become an end in itself. And I'm reminded, and I'll kind of close with this and then recap. I read a book long ago by I believe it was Jewish rabbi, and he said that the object of prayer is not prayer, the object of prayer is God. Abraham Heschel was his name, if I recall right. I can't remember the book off the top of my head. I might have to dig around for it. But yeah, the object of prayer is not prayer, but God. I think he was speaking to checklist prayer, like just doing prayer for the sake of prayer and missing the relationship in the process. And that is a hollow shadow shell of what prayer can be. So this was super enriching for me. One more time, just to recap, have a plan, super helpful to make it easier to act on. Use a resource, a much richer experience when you do. First Fruits has tremendous value in forming how your day rolls out, and beware of when you are treating your devotional time as just a to-do on your checklist rather than kind of a date with God. So I hope this is really helpful for you. Don't feel that you need to do 30 minutes. Do what you feel God calls you to do, but I highly encourage you, if you don't have a daily devotional time, to get something going and give yourself bonus lesson here. It's really helpful to decide how many days you're going to do it and allow yourself an out point and a reevaluation point. I was very intentional about saying, okay, I'm going to do this for 30 days, and at the end of 30 days, if I don't want to continue to do it, fine, I don't continue to do it. If I want to adopt it, or I want to adapt it and go on, great, awesome, I adapt it and go on. When you go into something like this open-ended, or so for example, if I'd gone into this open-ended and I went 60 days, went twice as long as I did, but then just kind of, it fell apart and I stopped doing it, not by design, what do you think I'd feel? I'd feel guilty and felt like I failed, though I did twice what I just did that I feel good about. So create a discrete time for a discipline, reevaluate, see if maybe you need to change it up. So, okay, I'm going to call it quits, and I look forward to seeing you in another video soon. I would love to hear what some of your favorite devotional practices are. Please put something in the comments below. Hit subscribe and notify if you want to see more things like this video. All those things would be awesome. Until I see you in the next video, I really encourage you to live a fit, faithful, epic life with this one precious life the Lord gives you. Bye now, and blessings.